Okay, we don't need to hear that one more time. Good morning. Welcome to the Community of the Wild Goose. Have a lot on my mind this morning, and it goes beyond these notes that I've made for this morning's message on power. I've had a few calls this week from individuals who are struggling, and we are always we're always on the verge of relinquishing power to what we actually don't have power over. And I don't want to talk directly about that. I want to talk generally about that and over that because it is part of the human condition. And that's where community comes in so valuably because we need each other. We need that hope, that encouragement that community offers. Community is when broken meets broken. And I want to tell you that I think a lot of us have been broken through these times in many different ways, both personal, national, global. We feel that sense of brokenness. And, this morning when I was preparing the final pieces of the message for this morning, I just realized I've got to be real honest with y'all, real straightforward. Not that I'm not always honest and true to myself, but I've got to tell the truth about what I am personally wrestling with. At Community of the Wild Goose, we've had these little medallions that we've given to people who have been baptized out there on the amphitheater, out in the desert. We call them splashdisms. And on the the back side of this little medallion of the goose on one side, on the other side it says, "Speak your truth." And if we can't speak our truth, then what have we got? What have we got? So, and part of speaking our truth is speaking of what we wrestle with, what we are wrestling with on an individual basis, on a regular basis. And so I want to share with you, first of all, what I'm wrestling with in these times. And that is that I'm going to move this over here. Hopefully it doesn't interfere with y'all, because I realize as I look over, then I stop looking at you. One of the things that I wrestle with is my community, our community, the community of the Wild Goose, is made up of so many different people, ideas, culture. We have some things in common. We have one thing very much in common, but we are made up of, on the far spectrum of politics, on each side, on issues. It is made up. Addiction does not only go to one population of people. It goes from Tolleson to Scottsdale, from Maine to California, and beyond that. So we have everybody in this community that we share in common the idea of being overwhelmed by something and addicted to something. And I'll say it again. This is not reserved for the substance abuser, for the alcoholic. The addict and the alcoholic is the light of the world to anybody who will listen to what it means to be awakened and alive, to be empowered, to be with God, not overpowered by things. So we have these relapses at a time. But what I wrestle with is that every Sunday I've got to figure out, I think I need to figure out how to navigate through these treacherous political waters and get a message that is going to be accessible to all people, regardless of where you're coming from, and yet struggle with the process of, am I being true to myself and where I'm coming from? And I get the feeling that every spiritual leader that gives a message is struggling with this right now. How do I navigate? I don't care how righteous or spiritual you are as a person, when you deal with community, you're having to navigate. And one minute I'll think, you know what? I just need to speak my mind. The next minute I'm like, is that self-serving? So I want to talk about power in this regard. But before I even begin, I just want to share with you further on the struggle that I've left things in the past. I've left communities in the past. I've left places in the past that I felt like I just could not feel with good conscience, that I couldn't speak my mind and speak my truth. I could, but it would not have landed me in favor. We do that on our jobs, the fear of losing a paycheck. I fear that if I really tell you what's on my mind right now, and it's on YouTube and it's live and it's going to go out in public, it's going to ruin sources of income for me as far as speaking engagements. But then I have to ask myself, am I being true to myself? Because I believe the problem, you know what? I'm not concerning myself with the problem outside of faith this morning. Christianity, my own Christian faith, is what I'm concerned with. Within this community, we have not just this community, but in this Western culture of Christianity, we have people on different spectrums within the supposed way of following Christ, where one group is claiming others, because of their politics, are ushering in Marxism, and we have other ones on one side saying other ones are fascist, and we have these things going back and forth. Now, see, I told you, the minute I use some of these terms, it might put at odds people who don't want to hear this stuff. But I want to tell you that I'm struggling with all of it, not just this side or that side, all of it. I have a feeling there's a lot of you who feel the same way as I do, just stinking tired of the battle that goes on, where we're no longer seeking community. We're no longer seeking to understand where somebody's coming from. And I get caught up in that also. But that isn't what I'm concerned about, of what is right and who's saying the right thing and is somebody going to be heard, as much as it is how it is becoming powerful over us and we lose our power. We need courage to be able to escape this kind of thing. And my thoughts have become, what would happen if we just walked away from a political party? What if we just walked away from formulations of tribal Christianity? What if we just walked away from it and took a sabbatical for it and just decided we were going to study what the wild goose, as the Celtics called the wild spirit, what the Holy Spirit, the wild goose, was drawing us and leading us into, taking us out of the self-made treacherous waters and into the flowing waters of adventure and uncertainty. What if we were to let go of the things that have walled us in, that we thought needed to be right, needed to be enough and be in control, and let it all go for a period of time or forever, and said, you know what, I don't want to live like my friend Phil, who lives in Missouri. We were talking, he goes, you know what, Henry, he says, when they use that phrase, what would Jesus do? He goes, I think that was mistaken. He said, what I think we should have always been asking ourselves is, what did Jesus do? What did he do? Not what would he do in these circumstances? What did he do? And you know what I read when I push back on any kind of tribal Christianity or politic or whatever? I just take a break from it all and I just look and see what Jesus was doing. It's stunning, because I think that's what he was going through too during those times. And so he just grabbed 12 people and pulled them together and said, I want to show you the way, an alternative way to think, an alternative way to live. And if you don't think that they were fearful at that time, because they believed at that time that power was in both the religious and the political places. And yet Jesus was drawing them out and away to teach them the way, the third way, an alternative way of loving, a counterintuitive way to live. And so I find myself at crossroads every once in a while in my life when I just say, you know what? I know these words are going to sound provocative, but I almost need to say them to be able to begin to live it. And once again, I will say this. I am leaving Christianity, and I've been leaving it for a long time. It got me in trouble the last time I wrote an article on that, when my article was entitled Leaving Christianity, Following Jesus. Because that sounds so radical, and yet it's not, because that's what Jesus was saying to them. Let's take a break from being Jew, from being Greek, from being Pharisee, from being peasant, from being servant, between master. Let's take a break from that and go on a long walk that we may not want to return from, because the walk will take us into places we never thought we would go. Does it mean that we disengage from the world and its issues? No, but it means that we don't deal with the issues without being influenced by what we are experiencing in the freedom walk with Christ. That is the kind of power that because everything is counterintuitive on the way. It's counterintuitive. And that's what happens. See, when we become taking our information from Fox or MSNBC, or from our closest friend and ally or our enemy, from this candidate or that candidate, when it becomes such an obsessive barrage of information, right or wrong, it doesn't make any difference. I've had it with it. It begins to influence the heart. And the heart begins to degenerate into fear. And maybe there comes a time when we just need to say, steal me away, God. Take me away from this. And it's not dying physically. It's dying to that which had been lording over me and had power over me. Even the things that I believe with all of my heart I am right about. Even the things that I believe I was right about. not with the goal of stopping believing in what I believe to be true, but not letting it lord over me to where I cannot find intimacy with other human beings. How do we do this? In AA, it says the first step of new life for the aware, for those who are aware, is to admit that we are powerless over. Notice it doesn't say with, it says over. I'm powerless. I do not have the power to be over something that actually has power over me, the things that I don't have control of. And because of my desire to become in control over these things, my life has become unmanageable. I tried to defeat my negative traits with all of my effort, and I found out that I had no power over that. I only had the power to escape and leave what I was doing before and enter onto a journey of the unknown and the uncertain. That's the walk, the way. Letting go of what I think I have control of, and seeking out the reminders from those who care about me. How cool would that be to be able to call somebody and say, you know what, I think I've gotten so-and-so on TV too much in my head, or this thing or that person. It doesn't mean that you abandon your principles or your party or whatever it is. But if you're like me and you've had it, maybe we need to seek the wild goose, the spirit that roams free, to teach us how to let go of what has enslaved us. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm ready to take a very long sabbatical from all of that and say, God, teach me what it is that you want me to know, instead of me thinking what I need to know and I'm supposed to know. You know, I love elephants, as many of you know. They're huge and powerful, yet they don't seem to wield their power against people. It used to break my heart when I was little and I was taken to the circus, and I'd see this giant elephant and the trainer with a cocky attitude goes and slips his head beneath the hoof of the elephant. And it seems to just look at the crowd like, look what a big man I am, that I'm brave enough to put my head underneath the hoof of an elephant that could go and squish it just like that. And I can control him because he won't. That's the false illusion of what we do with that which we become addicted to. No matter what it is, it's that we think we can slip our head underneath what has more power over us than we realize, and that we can survive it. That's arrogance. That's a disrespect for the strength that animal has, just in order to stroke the ego of the trainer. I loved going to SeaWorld and watching watching Shamu fly out of the water. And my kids will tell you, I would go back to that show 2 or 3 times, and I cried during Shamu, and I couldn't figure out why I was touched by it. I think it was because here is this enormously huge animal that is being trained by what looks about this small when you're sitting in the stands, a human being. And it is willing to lift its body out of the water unnaturally because it's being trained to do that. And then I started to realize it was just to get a fish. It was to get a fish. It was to get food. Like a feudalistic lord, they are made to leap out of the water, and I didn't realize that's what was bothering me. We live these existences where we are fearful that God is like a feudalistic lord that says, I'll let you live if you obey me. You see, Jesus did not show power over, he showed power with. Brene Brown was talking about, in her research, the different kinds of power, the power over and the power with, and the power within. And we use those powers in different ways. So check out what it says in Genesis. It says, then the Lord God said, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, like a God, knowing good and evil. And now he might stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. And they saw that as dangerous. Why? Because that person does not live in the moment. It lives for the forever. It does not appreciate what is present in the here and now. And it begins to think that it is God also. The Hebrew for that word power is the hand. Think about the power of the hand. Now, this is going to get kind of weird, but there is a spiritual practice that I was led with in California, where the leader said, I want you to look at your hands and think of all the things that your hands have touched. I told you it would be awkward. It makes it awkward when you think of that way, but think of the non-weird things that these hands have touched. The children in your life, those who have gone before us with hugs, foods that you've created meals out of, the trees in the forest, water cupped in your hands. And think of the things that these hands have done that have caused harm. They're powerful. And so the word power used in that aspect of hand is to let go and to not grasp and control. It's to release and let go. And so when Adam ate the fruit from the tree that was in the middle of the garden, he put something at the center that shouldn't be there, himself. It was as if he took his hand and took the fruit and grasped what he ought not to grasp. It says, though in very nature God, Jesus did not see equality with God as something to be grasped, but lowered himself even to the form of a servant. And then he was exalted. And by the way, I want to say something about the word servant. When we think of power and we think about servant leadership, I'm bothered by the word servant. Because when I think of servant, I think of somebody who is a slave. Now, we ought to lower ourselves even to the foremost. That's pretty low. But in this life of integrating with other people, we need to learn how to be servers, not servants. If a person at a restaurant brings you your food, they're not called a servant. They're called a server. Why? Because they are participating in my desire to be able to eat a meal and enjoy my company. And I appreciate the fact that they are, out of the goodness of their heart and their job, serving me, not a servant. They are not my servant. And I know a lot of people treat servers like servants. And you can tell the difference in the table that you're waiting on, whether you're being treated like a server or a servant. So I like the idea more of server leadership. Think in terms of a leader that is not having power over, but power with. Why? Because they are empowering you to do what it is that you want to do and need to do, not lording over you. Because when you lord over, or you want to have power over because you think this is the right way, it becomes cultish. And I would say that most of what I'm experiencing in church today, institutionally, is we have the extreme of proposing principles and ideas that you must fall in line with, as though you are not unless. It's the power over you, or a complacency that I'm afraid to navigate through these hard issues of the way because of all the different types of people are there. So you want to maintain your place, your status, your church. I remember back in the day as a young Christian, when it was thought of that Christianity in that mainline Christianity and even Catholicism was considered a cult. and that the cathedrals and the gold that was inside the cathedrals, whoa, shame on them. Look at how they waste the money in that. And now today, those very people have their own churches called non-denominational churches with thousands of people that may not have gold in their churches, but they rent out stadiums, they rent out arenas, and they line them with materials and with social media stuff that they need a huge budget. We just switched our attention from the statues and the gold to the media, the property, and the branding. It's no different. It's no different. No wonder Jesus took the 12 and said, let me teach you something totally different. What did Jesus do with the power that he had? Think of Zacchaeus and the tree. Zacchaeus had power from the sense of having land, from having a job that paid more than he really deserved because he extorted money from the people he'd collected taxes from. So he had power, but he had power because of what he could lord over them. See, that kind of power is not respected, it's obeyed. Many parents get their children to obey them because they're afraid. But there's no intimacy in relationship. A child who seems to be falling in line obeying does not necessarily mean that they have intimacy with the parent, because the parent was over them, not with them in those limits and those boundaries, empowering them to be little human beings, to be able to enjoy each other and to raise up, to know how to use that power. So Jesus sees Zacchaeus in the tree. He doesn't say, dude, you are a horrible person and you need to get down from there and go make up for everything you did. How does Jesus inspire Zacchaeus? He said, Zacchaeus, you and I are going to have a meal together. I'm coming to your house for dinner. That is what it means to be a server, even in the face of behaviors that you don't like. And how upsetting that would be if people saw that I was having dinner with somebody who they just honestly don't like and they know they're doing wrong things. That would be a challenge for me to have dinner with them. It would be, I think, for you too. And yet that is the way. Oh, at least to invite. Not to win them over or to teach them a lesson, but to be in human relationship and see what those outcomes might be. That's the community of the Wild Goose on a huge spectrum of different types of people. Doesn't mean I hold back from my thoughts, my opinions, my beliefs. I think you all know where I'm at with these things. Paul himself had power, and he was dragging in followers of the way and bringing them to the authorities that they might be executed and punished for their choosing an alternative way. Paul had power of the hand. He had power of the hand. But then he was stopped in midstream. And when he stopped, he was blinded and he was awakened in his fear. He had hit rock bottom, and a voice was said to him, why are you persecuting me? And he goes, I didn't think I was doing that. I thought I was doing what was right in God's eyes. No, you thought it was because you were lording it over. Now let's change directions. And so Paul, speaking of Jesus, was the one who said, though in very nature, God did not see equality with God as something to be grasped, but lowered himself even to the form of a servant. This is Paul, the one who lorded power over, but he gave that up in order that he would have power with. And he was exalted with power. And he became a leader in a different way. Servant versus server. Think of who your favorite people have been that have influenced your life in such big ways. Most people will answer that question not with somebody they worked for. but somebody who has touched their heart in very huge ways. Think about what it would be like to not have power over you as in their occupation, a waiter, a server. In other words, not a waiter, waitress, servers, nurses, coaches, realtors, CEOs, board members, parents. Every one of these has influence over people. We all have some influence over people. In some way, we have influence over people. And what does it mean to have influence? It means that I have the capacity to influence their thinking and their behavior and their personal growth. And with it, we must recognize that we surrender to a server's attitude rather than a master's attitude, so that we never use power over, but we use power with. The same Paul who gave up that power over in order that he would have the power of God with him, says this in Ephesians: "For this reason I bend my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth derives its name, that he would grant you, according to the riches of his glory, to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in the inner self, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, and that you may be rooted and grounded in love, and you may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the width and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ, which surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to all the fullness of God." And then listen to this incredible benediction. Not my benediction, but this one that he gives. "Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly beyond all that we ask or think, according to the power that works within us, to him be the glory in the church and in Christ Jesus to all generations, forever and ever. Amen." I listened to Brene Brown's interview with this individual, and these were two of the quotes that I absolutely loved. The first one was, "In everyone are the eyes of bravery, and everyone is bravery of the heart, and someday it will be summoned." If you've been struggling this week and you doubt your courage and your ability, just recognize that it might have been lying latent within you. And it is moments such as these that it becomes summoned. The other one is, courage is the greatest virtue, because without it, we cannot love with abandon. I love that idea of loving with abandon. Just that Chariots of Fire, to quote an old movie, bring back an old movie, of that flailing legs, the Forrest Gump with the braces flying off. You might have been like Forrest Gump, and the braces on your legs might have been your party affiliation, your religious leanings, your Christian denomination, your institution, or your drugs and your alcohol. And the more we run with uncertainty and with abandon towards a direction that we have no idea where we are going, perhaps the shackles will release. I encourage you to join with me and leave all that is behind and take some time to discover the way, the radical, empowering way that allows me to let go of the power that I think of I have, the illusions that I thought I had. And in that, maybe we can begin, as Godspell says, have a new city, build a new place, a new city, a beautiful place where our focus isn't on what is to be right or enough or in control. And I encourage each one of you that has struggled this week to summon that courage that is within you that you didn't know you had. It is in there. It is not something that is alien. It is something that hasn't been exercised. The God who is with us is where we get our power, not the God who is over us. We want God to be over us when it's convenient. change this, move this, help me get it through their thick skull. And in the silence, we become frustrated and say, perhaps there is no God, or he doesn't care for me, he's not listening. But perhaps it is the God who knows that within each one of us, we have the courage and the bravery that is lying latent, not to do heroic things, but to be ordinary and awkward and allow the extraordinary to take place in the moments when I felt weakest. That is power with. And finally, I want to leave you with the one I quote so often, John Donahue, and let this be our benediction. And it is called The Eyes of Jesus. And just take time to let go of any resistance, the yeah buts. Okay, I'm not calling you into following Henry Rojas. God forbid. I'm calling you to follow your heart that says none of this is okay, that has power over me. God, I summons the bravery and courage that is within me to relinquish the power that I think I have over, and allow you to be with and in me, that I might be an influence on my own life and the influence around those around me, for their benefit, for their growth, for their thinking, and for their behavior. Just rest and listen to the words of the eyes of Jesus. I imagine the eyes of Jesus were harvest brown, the light of their gazing suffused with the seasons. The shadow of winter, the mind of spring, the blues of summer, and amber of harvest. A gaze that is perfect sister to the kindness that dwells in his beautiful hands. The eyes of Jesus gaze on us, stirring in the heart's day the confidence of seasons that never lose their way to harvest. This gaze knows the signature of our heartbeat, the first glimmer from the dawn that dreamed our minds, the crevices where thoughts grow long before the longing in the bones sends them towards the mind's eye. The artistry of the emptiness that knows to slow the hunger of outside things until they weave into the twilight side of the heart. A gaze full of all that is still future, looking out for us to glimpse the jeweled light in winter stone. Quickening the eyes that look at us to see through to where words are blind to say what we would love. Forever falling softly on our faces, his gaze plies the soul with light, laying down a luminous layer beneath our brief and brittle days until the appointed dawn comes assured and harvest deft, to unravel the last black knot. And we are back home in the house that we have never left. The bravery and the courage lies within each one of us that must be summoned by our inner observer that knows. Let us relinquish all forms of tribal faith and Christianity and religion that demands lording under, being lorded over, being dominated and controlled, and follow the way of Jesus that says that we must have courage to walk away from what is familiar, or we might not be able to love with abandon. From now on, I pray that my message on Sundays at the Community of the Wild Goose will be one of walking like the 12 away from the world for a while and seeking the commonality of the love of God. Not because we are avoiding the issues, so to speak, but because we have many issues to deal with and many people, and we must have the inner strength to be able to do what Jesus did: clothe the poor, feed the hungry, visit the imprisoned, visit the widows. And if we do that, then we will accomplish the 2 commandments that Jesus left us with. Only 2. Only 2. You'd think we'd be able to pull it off. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and mind and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. They cross in the middle, vertical and horizontal, God and others. And may we courageously experience freedom that defies all the chaos in our lives, one day at a time, in the here and now.